coming in under minus 1/10 on headline, minus 1/10. We're expecting the exact opposite. We were expecting up 1/10, minus 1/10. Well, we equal where we were in May of 2020 to find a lower number. Here all the way to April of 2020, the heavy COVID-affected months of the calendar. If we take food and energy out, still coming in on the under, up 1/10. We're expecting triple that number, up 1/10. Well, that would equal where we were in June of last year. To find a lower number would be 0 in January of 21. These are definitely low numbers. Coming in under.
Hello, everybody. It is 8:30 Eastern Standard Time, April 10th, here in Eastern Tennessee. So that was the great Mark Santelli of CNBC discussing the second month of the Trump administration's numbers coming out on the CPI. It is down, including food and energy, 1/10 month over month. Okay, so 2.4 year over year. That is a normal inflation rate, folks, and that is good news. So why did we get this come down when we saw inflation going to the tail end of the Biden administration into January up, and it's starting to come down? And why that is because of anticipation and or actual deregulations coming into play. Okay. There's already been some deregulations, executive orders on energy, right? Because the cause of inflation is caused the demand side and the supply side, the reduction of energy production, the regulations on, among other things, that starting to go away along with, okay, once executive orders and other regulations that have already come into play, as well as ones that are coming down the pike. Also, you're getting those numbers because they're anticipating some sort of spending cuts. So that's the other side of the equation, supply and demand. Okay, supply pull, demand push, inflations. Okay, and what that will happen is reduce inflation, and it will cause prices to drop. Okay, we've also seen the price of energy, oil particularly, drop, whatever. So that's going to filter through the supply chains and everything. Who knows with this whole tariff thing, what happened and everything, what next month's report on April will be, but we'll see how that goes. But that's good numbers. Okay, so yeah, and of course they were expecting higher, not significantly higher, but they are. So yeah, that's winning, folks. We've stopped the inflation rate. Now, prices are still going up because there's still inflation, but there's a natural inflation built into a healthy economy. And we're not nearly there yet, but we're not getting, remember, it's 9%. We still have that gap up from 2021, 2022 numbers. Okay, that saw the purchasing power of the average American citizen drop, we'll just say 20% in like a 2-year period. Okay, 2-3 year period, and then it came down. Remember, they used to be like, oh, inflation's coming down. No, and they made it seem like prices were. No, they weren't. The rate was still high, but going up at a less high rate. So here's an instance where month over month, it actually went negative, which means net prices dropped, okay, including food and energy, and that is fantastic. The year over year is only 2.4%. And that is mostly because of the last 2 months of that. Had it not been this 2 months, it'd probably be 3 or over 3 year over year. Okay. And a lot of times when you see these numbers, there's a lag time. So when you see this product go up in price, that's a month or 2 behind. So don't expect to see certain prices start to accelerate, okay, or still go up at the same rates. You'll see them frozen. Maybe some products come down, like we've seen eggs come down, for example. And just the way, like, your gas price is predicated on weeks later after oil prices based upon those contracts. Okay, so that's really good news today. So I just wanted to start off with that, with the good old Mark Santelli on his report on that breaking news. So let's move on to... This is from Donald Trump Jr. Breaking. Inflation drops to 2.4% for the month of March, lower than expected, and core CPI inflation falls below 3.0%, the lowest since March 2021. Promises made, promises kept. 2 months, folks. 2. All right. So moving on from that. All right. Uh, this was an article from Zero Hedge. So we'll scroll up a little bit here. Sorry. Jobless claims keep rising in deep tri-state region as Doge impacts accelerate. They're referring to Maryland, D.C., and Virginia here, particularly the D.C. metropolitan area. I don't know why they call it tri-state since D.C.'s not a state. Maybe they're putting in Delaware in there. Who knows? But another week, another solid jobless claims print, seemingly crushing the Paul Revere-ish cries of a recession is coming from the left and the legacy media. 223,000 Americans filed for jobless benefits for the first time last week, a number that has basically been flat near multi-decade lows for the last 4 years. Last week's break above 1.9 million Americans continuing to take jobless breaks was revised back down. Shocker. Government revised it in a more, we'll call it Republican, Trumpian view. But anyway, back down and into the range it has been in the last year or so. Here's your chart. Looking at the deep tri-state area, we see claims surged in Virginia. Jobless claims keep rising in deep tri-state region as Doge impact accelerates. Okay. You can see the chart going up. Boom. Is Doge's work finally starting to show? And you see that huge upslope. So I don't want to get to details of the chart because that's not really the point. The point is you see the slope up, you see it in that area. Why is that? Because of the federal employees that have been laid off, the federal employees who took the early buyout, the federal employees who got laid off, whatever. Okay, but that's a significant amount of people because it's been like tens of thousands of people pretty much. Okay, and because of halting to certain cuts, to certain NGOs, freezing funds, okay, it's going to affect that. Remember, the 3 largest income counties in the United States basically are Montgomery County, Maryland, Fairfax, and Loudoun counties, Virginia. NGOs, a gravy train from the corrupt U.S. federal government imperial capital known as Washington, D.C., the administrative state, the deep state. Now, if you notice, it's not the highest, wealthiest that I know of counties in terms of net worth, but in terms of income. That's that gravy train. So you're going to see the jobless claims increase specifically in that area. But we've also noticed during like the initial jobs report is that manufacturing was up. Actual private sector, what drives economic growth, key things like manufacturing and other agriculture, energy, construction, those are the jobs that drive your economy. Under the Biden administration, and that's why they're saying, it was relatively flat, these job numbers, because it was all government jobs, state and local, federal, and it was all, okay, the money that, the jobs that suck money out of the economy, okay, and service sectors like healthcare, which is de facto the way our healthcare system is and the billing system, okay, it's basically socialized medicine to begin with, okay, just because it's run by the insurance companies are just run by, the actual health insurance and the paying is just run by a bunch of large corporations, but it's still top down from the regulations to how it's administered. You throw a Medicare and Medicaid and everything in there, okay? So it's a de facto government job anyway, but that's the kind of jobs you were seeing, okay? You were also seeing, we did on the Obama administration, part-time jobs up, full-time jobs down, okay? We went from 134 million full-time jobs in the United States to 131 million full-time jobs, while importing 15 to 20 million illegal immigrants on top of the legal immigrants that come in here. Not a healthy economy, guys. Okay, all right. And they said the stock market. Now they love the stock market. You know, they're all about the stock market now with the whole tariff thing. Okay, remember, argument here has been that it's based upon in part by inflated assets due to inflation and the decrease in the purchasing power of the U.S. dollar. Our net real GDP and productivity is declining, and that's what Trump is trying to reverse. Anyway, so we're getting some results on CPI, and we're getting results in there. Let these government hacks and these, NGOs who have connections get a real freaking job that puts money into the economy, not take out and put in their pocket. I love it. Actually, since you're all a bunch of liberals who aren't real Virginians anyway, why don't you move back to the state you're from, like Massachusetts or whatever, where daddy was a hedge fund manager or something like that. All right? That'd be great. Maybe you can turn Virginia red again. So, moving on. Justin, Speaker Johnson says he has the votes to move forward with Trump-backed spending bill. Major cuts, at least 1.5 trillion in savings for the American people. Many of us are going to aim much higher. Well, here's the deal. If you don't know, since this tweet was out, the blueprint for the House bill, which is based upon the Senate bill because of Senate reconciliation rules, right? You're allowed 2 reconciliations a year. It gets rid of the filibuster. You need the simple vote. So they're coordinating. They're in secret because I don't know many details. The 1.5 trillion, I have a gut feeling it's over 10 years, which is going to do not enough to lower this deficit, especially since we passed $1 trillion NDAA and increased military spending. These DOGE cuts need to be codified. We need to lower spending dramatically, streamline agencies, shut down USAID, get rid of the Department of Education. Actually what lobby from the Department of Education are the Senate Republicans afraid of? Or any Republican? Just do it and get this done. You've been promising since Reagan to get rid of Department of Education. Just do it. This top line number of 1.5 is not enough. It is not 1.5 tomorrow, or a deficit goes from 2 trillion to 500 billion. That is not what that is. That is over a period of time, probably 10 years. I don't know the details yet. But anyway, the blueprint was passed. The Senate's going to pass their blueprint. Then they're actually going to pass the real bill. And then they'll conference it, pass it again, and then we'll have the one big beautiful bill. Now, there was pushback from the conservatives. I don't know the exact names of who they are, but my guess is Thomas Massie, Chip Roy, Ralph Norman, the regular fiscal hawks that have been there. But they voted for it. Trump, I heard, got involved. Of course he did. Whatever. I believe not only because of economic reasons, but also liberty-based reasons, as we saw what the administrative state can do to you, as we saw during forced vaccine mandates and mask mandates and threatening social media companies if you don't take down these people off of their website and all that stuff. So it's dual linked. You gotta gut this administrative state. The problem is I don't trust Speaker Johnson. And I definitely don't trust Lindsey Graham, the budget chair in the Senate. And I can't stand John Thune, just neocon, big spending Republicans. Okay. Again, they don't represent the voters. But we'll see what this actual bill really has in it. Does it have teeth? Trump tax cuts have to be permanent. That's great. I'm all for that. I love that bill. I wouldn't have a problem floating up the corporate tax rate a couple points to help lower deficits. I like get rid of the no tax on Social Security. It's not a big deal anyway. You don't pay up to 85% as it is. And then I would also get rid of no tax on tips. That's good. And then I would be in favor of a new bracket, a really high-end bracket. It can have its sunset, but, I'm not talking like the 450 39.6 bracket that's been goes back and forth between 36 and 39.6. I'm talking about 1 million plus, 2 million plus, maybe a 44% bracket like Bannon wanted back in 2017. And you can have that one sunset. Okay, remember a lot of when you get that kind of income, you have a certain amount of net worth. You're buying foreign luxury products, real estate overseas. Okay, you're not that money. You're investing, and a lot of your investing is going to China and other funds and individual managed accounts that invest a lot of stuff. Okay, and that's still not a huge impact in their lifestyle and the economy. But what it will do, at least in the short term, is really shrink these deficits while we have a chance to possibly bring back a manufacturing base, grow this economy a little bit more, get some interest rates down a little bit more, okay, as inflation is not an issue going forward. So I think that would be a good temporary tax to have. Me, ideally, I don't want any tax, but we have a $37 trillion. I would rewind the clock and never have passed the 16th Amendment that imposed the income tax, okay? But we have it, and we have to work where we are. So let's at least use what we have to get this under control, because that is for the benefit of the long-term and future generations of the United States and its citizens. So moving in, so I'll keep track on that, but moving on. Breaking. Federal judge allows the Trump administration require everyone in the U.S. illegally to register with the federal government. Well, why not? Of course you should. You're here illegally. You were given a a Customs Border Patrol phone. You were given a court date. We got to know who's here. That is not a violation of anybody's rights any way whatsoever. And the federal judge is correct on this. Now, there was one court case tonight broke out that there was one individual who is now in El Salvador that we deported, a member of MS-13, that this one particular individual, and I believe it was the U.S. Supreme Court did this, the Trump administration has to get him back for due process. I don't know the particulars of that case. To me, an individual, I don't really dive into very specific cases about one person. And because I don't know the particulars, I'm not going to make a comment either way on this. But what I do see at first glance is that if it's one individual case, if it's one specific thing that was a red flag for them, that he should have had due process, because I've argued that they can be deported just by being illegally because of Article 2 power of the executive branch and the way our immigration system is, with Trump heading the executive branch. They're not hindering his policies. They're just saying this one guy for whatever reason. Okay? And anybody who commits a crime, if you're going to be incarcerated, should get due process. But that doesn't mean the president doesn't have a right to deport illegal aliens or revoke visas of individuals. Okay? Because everybody in that federal government works for the president because he is the elected president. All the power is vested in the president because he's the only one in the federal executive branch that is accountable to the people, and the founders wanted it that way. So this was a good ruling. So moving on. Boom, a little politics here. Rich Barris, the People's Pundit. Wow, John Cornyn is an America last dinosaur. The Republican Party will die along with the real Trump legacy if this continues. Voting for a cabinet nominee is a given for a Democratic president. A Republican president has to endorse unrepresentative shitters. Tim Scott. John Cornyn is a leader who delivers on President Trump's agenda and for the people of Texas in the U.S. Senate, blah, blah, blah. Barris is right. John Cornyn's a piece of garbage. He does not represent the voters and the residents and citizens of Texas, nor does he definitely doesn't represent the GOP base. Ken Paxton has done his job, said what he was going to do when he became Attorney General, was elected handily. The Bushes threw a primary challenge at him. He crushed them there, and then he won re-election easily. He represents the voters. He represents the America First agenda. He's been active, lawsuits like crazy against the Biden administration. And John Cornyn is a neocon globalist, liberal Republican sellout, period. And Trump is going to be dumb enough to endorse him because he's going to want the relationships and he's not going to want to piss off John Thune and that. And that's my guts telling me. But Trump has got endorsements wrong for certain reasons, okay? And if that comes through, we have to go against him and support Ken Paxton, period, okay? Period. John Cornyn, and defeating John Cornyn in a 2026 primary is going to go a long way. Okay, with him gone, it's a threat. And if you don't know anything about Texas state politics, even though the Republicans control the House, they have a speaker who was mostly elected by Democrats. It's really talk about rhinos. It's horrendous. Okay, you know, I think the Texas House just passed like Pakistani Day or something. And what are they doing? Okay, again, not representing it. So that will help the voters and citizens of Texas because it will send the shock through that establishment. So we got to make sure that if Trump does not endorse Cornyn's going to lose. Paxton's already ahead in the polls. But there are a lot of people who are going to be like, oh, Trump endorsed Cornyn, he must be good. No, there are a lot of reasons behind the scenes. And Trump is thinking his agenda for the next 2 years. We have to think about the party and us as a people being representative for our lifetimes. Okay? So keep that in mind. And we don't hold Trump against it. I understand why he does some of these stupid endorsements sometimes. Okay. Anyway, moving on. Here we go. Some tariffs. I love, 3 videos in a row I'm putting this woman on. I just love Ursula von der Leyen, the unelected High Commissioner of the European Union who loves to talk about democracy and warmongers and tariffs. Okay, so now she's going back the other way on tariffs. EU pauses retaliatory tariffs following Trump's trade U-turn. Okay, well, why are we doing the U-turn? I said there were several camps on Trump's theories on Liberation Day. So what do we got? 70 countries called. They want to negotiate. So I think camps 1, 2, and 3 were all correct. I'm going to leave some tariffs on. That 10% is going to stay. And that's for repatriation of manufacturing base and reindustrialization and for American workers and national security reasons. I'm going to protect key industries here in the United States, aluminum, steel, coal, core things. Okay. I'm going to go after, I'm going to use this as leverage to negotiate. And each country will come up with its own deal and a bilateral trade agreement. And that's where it's leading to. Okay, and that's why that pause did the market rally. China, the doubling down on. I think that is our biggest. It's the biggest regional hegemon outside the United States. It is our chief rival globally, but they they make massive amounts of things we not want, need, and I think he's going to keep, even with some sort of deal that might crank out or some sort of like, let's hold the brakes thing occurs with China because of that. He's still going to want to force like certain key manufacturers of, let's say, pharmaceuticals, that everyday pharmaceuticals that we need, blood thinners and Coumadin and whatever types of drugs that are important, blood pressure medications, okay, that have been proven over the years to work, to make them here. If they're all made there, something happens, you go to war with China, they're not exporting to you. It's as simple as that. So it's a national security, it's a benefit to the United States, our citizens, okay, to have that some sort of security. And if you presented that to China, would understand that. Listen, this is all, we got to get them home. You got to understand that. And they'd be like, okay, any leader would understand that position. They're not stupid, okay, by any stretch of the imagination. So there you go on that front. So breaking, Meloni will defy the EU to travel to the U.S. next week to negotiate a trade deal on Italy's own terms. Trump is dismantling the EU. Well, I don't know if he's dismantling the EU. I would love that to happen. But so Prime Minister Meloni, who has been, remember, she was the next Mussolini, the press, and she was far right and whatever. Meanwhile, went along with the globalists and pressured, just the way Orban kind of caves all the time at the end. Yeah, he uses it for leverage and gets some stuff for it every once in a while. But she's thinking, we make some stuff and we want to have an alternative. But the problem is it's a common market. So there's only so much limit. She's limited by so much she can do on an individual trading term with Italy, as long as Italy's part of the European Union. And they're not liking that because it's going to encourage other countries to do that, whatever. So she's going to try to protect her core industries that her citizens need, as well as trying to allow competitive Italian products that they like to export to the United States to make sure that they can at least compete with the American products. So at least she's taking initiative. I think it's great. And if other people do that, hopefully it puts a crack in the European Union, which would be lovely. But that's nice. I mean, um, she's one of the better PMs of Europe, and I'm glad she's doing that because countries should be trading on their own terms that benefit their own citizens. We shouldn't be ripped off, and they shouldn't be ripped off. And countries have a right to protect core industries that are important to their basic survival. All right. Speaking of negotiations, Justin, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent has met with the Deputy Prime Minister of Vietnam to hammer out a trade deal tariff. Well, Vietnam got hit with 46%. So I guarantee you he was on a freaking plane within an hour of that. Okay. Now, the issue with Vietnam is there are a lot of accusations that China basically uses Vietnam as a conduit to bypass certain regulations and tariffs or whatever, exporting both to Europe and the United States. So I believe that not only are the tariffs and those goods are there, certain products that actually are made in Vietnam, they're going to try to separate and get Vietnam to crack down on that. Maybe Vietnam could tariff those goods, right? So basically what you do is it's all made in China. They ship it to Vietnam and they just slap it together real quick and then shoot it over to bypass. So the Trump administration knows this. I think they're going to try to get focus on that more so and say, hey, you're, if, I don't know, Nike, company don't really like anyway, but Nike actually made the sneaker fairly in Vietnam. We will just do that 10% tariff versus the 46. If you do that, that's basically what I think is going to happen in terms of Vietnam. But the point is that these countries are calling, remember, over 70. It's pretty good. All right. So let's move on. A little war update in Ukraine. I did a video last time up there on the left there. That's Bakova. Was taken in SUMY South, and now they're driving and basically fighting. Heavy fighting's going on right now in that Luknia position. That's in SUMY, south of where SUMY and Kursk meets. And these red lines are where the Russians are, and I've seen this on other sites, but this is the easiest map I saw, are driving there. And to the east, where the just east of that top arrow is basically the back line of the last holdout in Kursk for the Ukrainians. So they're clearly going after that. If they take that Luknaya, the Russians, the supply line is cut off and those troops in Kursk are trapped. And then they'll either surrender, they'll withdraw while they still have a chance to, and that's over. And then the SUMY and Kursk lines are completely aligned into one flat, straight line. And that means with the buildup we understand going on, the rumors are from multiple sources in Zaporozhye on the southwest and increasing in SUMY that Russia's going to launch an offensive. And you're going to have that on the very southwest of that 800-mile line and the northeast part of that major line on the huge flanks, putting major pressure. And then that'll be very thin for the Ukrainians to defend. So that's why I think that's why taking that village is important. And then the Russians can then concentrate more of their forces. So that's my video for today. I'm going to keep an eye out with the tariffs, see other economic news that might come out. Trade deals, a lot of these court cases with the tyrants in black robes, they're like the guards from Star Wars that's how I view them as, the the Sith guys, how we go with that. But it seems, every time it goes up to the appeals court, Supreme Court, most of the time we win. So it's a delay tactic. So the quickly we get through these courts, the more they should just the more we can then implement the policies that are important to us. But also, it shows that we shouldn't, if they reverse that, don't reverse that. Just hold still and wait until the court. Because if you reverse it, then you've given in to the delay tactics. Maybe you don't go forward anymore, but you just hold still for a little bit, say, yeah, you're obeying the order. Well, the moron, commie black robe guy gave you the order, but in a week it's going to be reversed in the Fourth Circuit or Seventh Circuit or whatever. So, don't go crazy. All right. Don't let them add more time that you have to implement your agenda that the people elected for and have the constitutional right to implement. So, going into the weekend, I'll keep on what's going on. If that Russian offensive does happen, see how these tariff negotiations go. Any political news that I'm following as well. Plus, we have the Canadian elections coming up in a couple weeks. We have the Romanian election next month, so I'm going to start looking closer into those things going on. So see how well this German and French coalitions go, and see if Le Pen can get her appeals going or get some of that reversed, and follow what's going on in France. So anyway, you can follow me on my X at Patriot Planner 1 and on my Getter at Patriot Planner. And if you like this video, please follow, like, and share. All right. Have a great night and weekend, and I'll see you next week.